Hello everyone, welcome back to the Global Alert TV channel. Please subscribe and like my videos because today we are diving deep into one of the most intriguing and sensitive geopolitical developments in Eastern Europe titled Russia's Shadow over Belarus Revolt. Ukraine moves quietly, a topic that reveals not only the power dynamics of a region caught between history and modern conflict but also the silent strategic maneuvers shaping tomorrow's Europe in ways that few people fully understand. Russia's influence over Belarus has been an open secret for decades, but the revolt that began to simmer within the Belarusian people following the 2020 presidential elections brought new life to old tensions and showed that even in the most tightly controlled societies the desire for freedom can erupt in unexpected ways. Belarus under Alexander Lukashenko has been called Europe's last dictatorship, where dissent is crushed, media is silenced, and opposition leaders often end up imprisoned or exiled. But behind this grim political landscape lies an even larger shadow cast by Moscow. For years Russia has seen Belarus as both a buffer zone and a brotherly ally, a nation that forms part of its sphere of influence in both strategic and cultural terms. When Lukashenko faced mass protests after the rigged election, Moscow didn't hesitate to step in, offering political backing, loans, security cooperation, and energy subsidies to ensure that Belarus stayed within its orbit. This is where the first layer of Russia's shadow truly becomes visible. It isn't always about tanks or troops, it's about control through dependence, through gas pipelines, propaganda, shared military systems, and intelligence cooperation designed to keep Minsk from drifting westward. Yet beneath this heavy shadow something remarkable happened. Ordinary Belarusians began to push back. Women in white clothes marched peacefully, workers from state factories stopped their machines, thousands of students and journalists risked arrest to demand change. It was a revolt of courage without weapons but with an unbreakable spirit. However, Russia's strategy was not to crush this revolt directly but to suffocate it slowly through support for Lukashenko's apparatus. While maintaining a public image of distance, Moscow understood that open interference might ignite stronger Western sanctions or push Belarus completely toward the European Union, so it played its cards quietly, cleverly ensuring that the revolt never became a revolution. Meanwhile, as all eyes were fixed on Belarus, something quieter but equally strategic was happening in Ukraine. Since 2014, Ukraine had been in a constant state of alert, facing aggression from Russia and struggling to preserve sovereignty. But what many failed to see is how Ukraine began to develop a subtle regional influence of its own. Ukrainian diplomats, analysts, and intelligence networks were watching Belarus carefully, offering moral support to Belarusian opposition groups but avoiding any public confrontation. Kyiv's approach was pragmatic. It had to balance solidarity with Belarusian protesters and the risk of provoking Russia's further aggression. This careful dance forms the essence of the phrase Ukraine moves quietly. In this context, quiet doesn't mean passive, it means calculated, resilient, and deeply aware that sometimes silence carries more power than noise. Ukraine was quietly building partnerships in the region, strengthening its defense sector, sharing experience with activists, and even shaping information spaces without declaring it openly. This silent influence was noticed neither by the Kremlin nor by Western observers until recently, when patterns of cooperation began to emerge between Belarusian exiles in Kyiv and Ukrainian policymakers who saw in Belarus's struggle a reflection of their own. Ukraine's quiet strategy extended beyond politics. It was also psychological and cultural. Ukrainian artists, journalists, and civil organizations opened their doors to Belarusians fleeing repression, creating a bridge of empathy that Moscow could not easily destroy. While Russia projected dominance through fear, Ukraine projected influence through shared humanity, and that became its most powerful weapon in this evolving chessboard of power. Every move mattered. Russia's shadow grew heavier as it pushed Belarus to deepen integration under the Union State Agreement, deploying joint military drills, creating shared air defense systems, and even considering the stationing of tactical nuclear weapons on Belarusian soil. This marked a new phase in the relationship where Belarus's sovereignty became more symbolic than real. Moscow's idea was simple: if it couldn't fully control Ukraine anymore, it would tighten its grip on Belarus, turning it into a forward base of strategic depth. But this control came at a price for both sides. For Belarus, it meant deeper isolation from the West and growing internal resentment. For Russia, it meant the burden of sustaining another dependent state amid costly wars and sanctions. The book or analysis titled Russia's Shadow over Belarus Revolt, Ukraine Moves quietly captures these contradictions beautifully, revealing that under every display of power lies a fragile web of fear, mistrust, and survival. The author or analyst doesn't simply describe events but dissects the anatomy of control, showing how Russia manipulates economy, identity, and security to maintain influence. What makes this work stand out? Its unique selling points are its depth of insight, its storytelling style, and its ability to humanize geopolitics. Instead of presenting cold numbers, it tells stories of people: mothers waiting for imprisoned sons, students broadcasting protests, protests on Telegram, soldiers on both sides questioning their loyalty, and diplomats trying to prevent disaster. It blends academic analysis with emotional truth, which makes it more relatable than many policy papers. The writing style is accessible enough for general readers yet deep enough for experts. This balance makes it a rare gem in modern political literature. One of the most powerful aspects of the narrative is how it portrays the emotional resilience of Belarusians. Despite living under constant fear of surveillance and arrest, they managed to create a digital resistance movement using social media encryption tools and symbolic gestures like white flags appearing in unexpected places. The book treats these acts not as small protests but as evidence of a nation's soul fighting to breathe in the shadow of empires. From a safety perspective, readers and researchers should be aware that studying or sharing information from inside Belarus can be risky. The regime still monitors dissent closely, and several journalists have been jailed for covering protests. Therefore, any form of activism inspired by this work should prioritize digital security and anonymity. The book wisely includes such warnings, highlighting that truth-seeking in authoritarian environments often comes at a high cost. It's both an ethical and practical safety feature, reminding readers to balance courage with caution. The narrative also touches upon psychological safety, emphasizing how constant fear, exhaustion, and propaganda can erode a society's mental health. This awareness makes the work not just political but humanitarian. It encourages empathy for people trapped between loyalty and freedom. The analytical structure further strengthens its appeal, combining geopolitical theory with storytelling that keeps readers emotionally invested. Each section transitions smoothly from policy to people, showing how decisions made in Moscow echo in Minsk's streets and how Ukraine's quiet decisions ripple through the region. The economic dimension adds another layer. Russia's use of energy pricing, subsidies, and trade sanctions as tools of control is explained in detail, showing that modern empires often wage wars not with bombs but with contracts and gas pipelines. The author unpacks how Belarus's dependence on Russian crude and gas has tied its economy to Moscow's will, and how Ukraine's gradual shift toward European energy independence quietly undermines that dominance in a world obsessed with open conflict. The book reveals the invisible battles being fought through media manipulation and cyber influence. Russia has long mastered disinformation campaigns, painting Belarus's opposition as Western puppets while simultaneously framing Ukraine as an aggressor. This dual narrative serves a single purpose: to justify Moscow's presence as protector while masking its control. One of the more subtle yet fascinating observations is how ordinary citizens now navigate information war, learning to decode propaganda and find truth through independent channels. This digital awakening, especially among youth, forms the quiet revolution that the Kremlin fears most. It's here that Ukraine's experience in information resilience becomes invaluable, sharing lessons learned from its own battles with Russian disinformation. These cross-border exchanges are small yet profound, shaping the next generation of Eastern European civil resistance. When it comes to pricing or access, this work is positioned in the mid to premium range depending on edition and format. Hardcover versions may retail around $40 to $50, while paperback and digital copies are more affordable. Given the richness of content and research quality, the price feels justified for policymakers, analysts, students, and anyone interested in post-Soviet dynamics. It offers immense value compared to mainstream geopolitical commentary. The conclusion draws the threads together elegantly, arguing that Russia's influence over Belarus is not absolute and Ukraine's quiet strategy is not weakness, it's wisdom in motion. The book or analysis suggests that the future of the region depends on how effectively smaller nations can adapt, resist, and communicate within the shadow of larger powers. It challenges the simplistic notion that might always makes right, instead proposing that endurance, adaptability, and truth can outlast brute force. This is perhaps its most inspiring message: that revolutions don't always roar, sometimes they whisper, sometimes they survive in silence until the moment is right. In the broader global context, this work also reminds us of the delicate balance between sovereignty and survival, between loyalty and freedom, and between silence and speech. For viewers of Global Alert TV, this analysis is not just about Eastern Europe, it's about understanding how modern influence works everywhere through media, economy, fear, and hope. The story of Belarus and Ukraine is a mirror of humanity's timeless struggle for dignity and independence. So as we conclude, remember that Russia's shadow may be vast, but even the darkest shadow exists only because there is light. Ukraine's quiet moves show that even in silence, nations can shape their destiny through patience, strategy, and unity. That's what makes this topic so relevant today. Thank you for watching Global Alert TV. Please like, share, and subscribe for more deep analyses on the forces that shape our world, because knowledge and awareness are the first steps to freedom and understanding in these turbulent times.